Yeah. Anytime. So it's, it's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes. I didn't see that one. Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Our meeting to order. Welcome to the Children's Trust of Alachua County regular business meeting for March 20th, 2023. If any member of the public wishes to be heard at the appropriate time, will come forward to the podium and introduce yourself to board members. Members of the public recognized by the chair will have 3 minutes to speak on a single subject matter or to address the current motion of the trust or function as a issue time. I could now get secretary to call the motion for the afternoon.
Member Burton,
Here.
Member Andrews,
Present.
Member Cornell,
Here.
Member Hart, Member Valero,
Here.
Member Peterson,
Here.
Member Snyder,
Here.
Member Swanson, here, Member Navarro, here.
We have a form. Item number 5, and person here. All right. Move to approval of the agenda, including any revisions.
Thank you. We can come up to full item number 7. I have a comment on that, and I would like to add an item for board discussion after policy 12 before 13 about the RFP, and we have the summer RFP. And we don't need a staff presentation or anything along those lines, but I would like to have a board discussion about it. Just to create who the board is with all this.
We'll approve the agenda and consent, removing item 7, adding 12.
Second.
Next, the agenda, I want to make sure I understand. So, number Peterson, you want to pull the budget review for discussion?
Yes.
Number 7, and then you want to have more discussion before the fund balance analysis.
Correct.
5:13. All right. And so what I'll do is consent agenda item 7, we will remove, and I'll put it down. I was told that item number 10, Mr. Deck is being canceled, he's not feeling well. And so what I will do is I'll put item 7 there, okay?
Great. Thank you for the comment.
And okay, we'll remove 10. You'll move 10, and then we'll put 7 there, and then we will put our people summary, our people in items 12 and 13 now, I'm 32 now. Any other discussion, any other requests from any other numbers? More in favor of approving our consent agenda as presented and the modification that I just. Oh, any public comment? I'm sorry, you got the public. Let's start on to the podium.
I'm on the agenda.
That's on the agenda. On the agenda, you mean, this is on the changes to our agenda. Do you have any discussion on? Okay, right. Any comments? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. How many people we got here? 8. Motion passes. No extension. All right, so. Let's ask do we have any public comments? None to that motion. I'm sorry, I don't usually work from this agenda here, and I hate that. So right now is the time where we go into our meeting to have general public comments. If there's any member wishing to address the board on an item that's not an agenda item, you come to the podium and give us your name, 3 minutes to address the comments.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board there. May I get a handout?
Oh, sure.
I've got sufficient language. That's what I need to be. Thanks, sir. There's something else. My name is Bill Kayla, and I'm the relatively new now CEO of CDF Family and Behavioral Health Services. We are an organization that works with children, youth, young adults, families, and communities in Alachua County. You perhaps know us from our interface youth shelter. That's a residential program we have here, but we also have outpatient council and school-based program. The reason I'm here today is, like many other not-for-profits, we have some specific financial needs. So I'm coming to you all with that. There are 3 items, and they all go together. We transport our children to school and programs in vans. Our vans, while they are still roadworthy, they are significantly depreciated. So we are seeking funding for a van. You need to know numbers or the general descriptions. Okay. The second item is we are building a new youth shelter. For those of you who know where it is, it's on Northwest 13th Street behind McDonald's and behind Checkers. It's substantially depreciated, severely depreciated. It was built in 1955, and while it's still technically safe, it is hardly state of the art. In fact, I worked for the company that expanded it and renovated it 20 years ago. And so that was 20 years ago. The building was built in 1955. We have leased through the Department of Student Families and Private Airport 12 acres, 2 acres of which we're going to use to build this new 20 shelter. We're going to replace 20 with 20, and we've received $1.3 million from the state, from the legislature, from the Department of Juvenile Justice. That's not sufficient to build a full project. So there's 2 items we are requesting. One would be a recreational area that is required. We have, it's required for youth, it's outside, and also to deal with energy efficiency over the very long term. We want to put solar on the roofs. So that's what we're asking for generally. Do you all have any questions? I've given you copies of the rendition of the outside of the shelter, and also that's more plan of what there's going to be. I've given you our annual report as a link. It's a QR code, so you can find that. If you do not know what CBS does, that will be going. So again, are there any questions you all have? Is there any follow-up that you would like?
Not right now. We have to alleviate and have any work like that. Is that right?
Okay, very good. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Dorothy Thomas. I know most of you, but for those of you I don't, I was one of the folks that was involved in the initial campaign and have been watching you guys virtually since this has been virtual. I always have kids up schlepping around this time of afternoon. But today I made them miss tennis practice because I wanted to come in person. So the reason I wanted to come is I've been working kind of behind the scenes with Mia and with other folks, with Christy and with Marcia, talking about kind of the vision for the Pritzker initiative. I've been working with the collaborative. I think that that's a very important thing that Mia has pulled together. And as we've been talking about this, and as we're kind of nearing the workshop on April 3rd, and all of the budget discussions that are going to be coming up over the course of the next, I don't know, couple of months. I wanted to reiterate something from that when we were working on the campaign. And that is that as we move into this budget year, I think we are finally in a position where we're poised to, rather than just kind of funding programs because they're good programs or whatever, to finally actualize some of our strategic vision. And I know that the strategic planning team and the staff and everybody have been working really hard to pull this big picture together. But I think that as we move towards particularly next month's meeting, where we're going to get all the feedback from everybody and the meeting that follows that, I just wanted to encourage you to think back to what we were talking about a long time ago. And I have all these little random pieces of paper that I've kept along the way. And one of the things that we focused on at the beginning when we were in the early stages of this is, how are we changing the systems? Are we reducing barriers? Are we incentivizing quality? How many children are being impacted? Are the ones who are needing extra help getting the extra help? And are we showing our priorities with our dollars? And I think that it's really important to think about that as we move forward. And I know it's hard to try and pull all of the information you guys have gotten together in the last couple of months into a budget by whenever you guys have to have that done, June, July, whenever it is this summer. But I hope that as you are thinking about funding things, every item that you fund, everything that you put in the budget, you'll think about, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve here? And how does this fit with our strategic vision? And I know our strategic vision is still coming together, but we kind of have an idea of what that looks like. And so even the programs that we funded since, the beginning of all of this, I hope that everyone that you put in the budget as we go forward, you're going to say, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? Is it achieving it? And does it match our vision? And I just wanted to say that at this meeting, because I don't know how it works at the workshop, if I'll have a chance to comment before everything. But as we go into that listening session and to the meeting afterwards, I just encourage you to think back about what we've been talking about all along and see how that all fits together. And also to call on staff to let you know what other trust visions, other Children's Services Council's visions have looked like, and how we may not be able to do it on the same scale as Miami, but maybe we can do a lot of the same things just on a smaller scale. Just wanted to put that back in your mind if it's not already, already happened. But thank you.
Hi, I'm Julie Monnery. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Well Florida and the Director for our Healthy Start Coalition. I just wanted to take a minute to introduce you to two of the gentlemen on our fatherhood team. Healthy Start received funding this last legislative session to implement a fatherhood initiative. It is called Team Dad. It's teaching, empowering, advocating, and mentoring. So we have a couple of our members of our team here with you today. I just wanted to introduce them, let you know what we're doing. This is Joe Neal. He's our fatherhood coordinator. And Gregory Wingley is our fatherhood specialist. He'll be primarily focusing on this area. We cover 16 counties, so you'll be seeing probably both of them plus one of our other team members, Adam, who is not here with us today. But I'm going to let Joe for just a couple of seconds tell you a little bit about our program. We just wanted to share with you the great work that they're going to be doing.
Thank you, Julie. So Team Dad, we're really excited about this. Raise of hands if you've heard that parenting is a mother's job. Only one person has heard that. Traditionally, a lot of people feel that parenting is for mothers. It's also we're here to challenge that. We're here to challenge that concept and bring dad to the forefront with the 24/7 dad curriculum. What that is a curriculum specialized just for fathers to go over soft skills for dads to see how we can move them into a parent role and be more involved with their children and have better communication with their partners. So traditionally, most curriculums in birth to age 5 are all tailored towards prenatal and postnatal, and they're geared towards mothers and the skills that they build. But this program is based all around soft skills for fathers and to get them more involved with their families' lives and make them better partners, better parents, all improve the quality of the family. So that is our mission. We're going to be starting very soon. We just got the green light on training and looking on all the programming. So we're just putting some things together as far as the rules for the program, and we'll be up and running and taking referrals. So you'll be seeing information coming out on our programs.
Thank you.
And Gregory is going to be your local representative mostly in this county. So we're happy to have him along and have went through training and look forward to having him present as well.
So we have one that has a question.
I don't know that you down because you were, but we were given a communication in our last board meeting about kind of a program that it seemed like there's some similarities. And I was wondering if, and I'm terrible with names of programs, so I don't know the name of the program, but it seemed like, is there a possibility that y'all can talk and see if there's something that can happen between the two programs?
Yeah, in an ideal world, obviously, we're collaborating with everybody, but to be clear, this is specifically for families that are in Healthy Start. So if they're in another home visiting program like Healthy Families, should I say that? It's specifically for Healthy Start. So if they're in Healthy Families, our Parents as Teachers program, our Nurse Family Partnership program, they cannot be also in this program. So it's like a supplemental service for our Healthy Start families. So if they're not in another home visiting program, they can enroll in Healthy Start. Dads can with their infant, or dad, even if mom is pregnant and their child isn't there yet, dad can enroll, but we can't do it if they're in another home visiting program. If they're not in other community programs like that, then yes, we can partner with them. And our services are one-on-one, they're not group sessions. So that's the other unique thing.
This program is actually for young teenagers.
Yeah.
I don't know if there can be collaboration, but if there's any, we hope that y'all would.
Have to design things so that cooperation is very.
So
Yeah, and there's a couple of grants out right now from DCF for funding for fatherhood programming, but they're for small entities. They have to have 25 or less employees. So I'm sure, I think Pastor Duncan has reached out to the group to see if everybody would like to collaborate on maybe doing something like that. So there will be more collaboration.
I think in the spirit of what Dorothy said too, the fine work that Julie and her team have done for a long time. I think as we look at some of these data as from the listening project and whatnot, it's going to be really helpful for us to think broader systems, but also who are the funders of these different initiatives, who qualifies for them, and where are the gaps. And we've talked about that, right, repeatedly. But I think we really want to make sure that we return to that so that we're taking advantage of both financial assistance, but also helping to support initiatives to collaborate, to be able to collaborate together when they can, right? When the regulation.
Yes, the way that this funding was done, every Healthy Start Coalition, regardless of their size, got the same. 32 of us got the same amount of money, whether you had 300 births or like us, you have 10,000 births. So we have 3 fatherhood gentlemen on our team that cover 16 counties, whereas, Manatee County has 1 or 1.5. So
And then there are county specific initiatives.
Yeah.
We just heard about one that's possible. So just looking at those things.
Yeah.
We can do that with our facilitators.
but we're excited and look for referrals and working with you guys. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. Just a follow-up to what Dr. Snyder was saying. I think there's also nothing that includes our serving a function of making sure everybody knows one another so that when somebody no longer meets the criteria for whatever silo you've been funded for, they know who to call. It's a whole lot easier to make referrals when there are direct connections already between. So warm handoff always works better. So I think just knowing who they are, who gets qualified, who pays for them, not only can we fill in gaps, so we can make sure that they know each other.
Great discussion. And I'm a huge supporter of home visiting programs, by the way. So definitely keep them in mind. My name is Yvette Robinson, and I am the CEO and founder of a group home that will be coming to Alachua County called Xavier House. And so I want to start off with telling you a little bit about a young man named Edward. And Edward was a 15, 16-year-old in foster care system who was in about 10 different placements. He was placed in a really rough group home where he was in a position to commit an initiating crime. They got caught, sentenced to a long-term juvenile facility. And while there, we got calls from the staff that this kid had scored the highest stage score they had ever seen. Edward aged out of the foster care system. He had unstable placements. He did have the wherewithal to enroll in college, but he didn't have the fundamental skills to be successful in college. So eventually he dropped out. And sadly, at age 20, he was in an accident and died. And so the idea behind Xavier House is to identify and serve kids in the foster care system that are like that. This model has never been done. And the idea is that Alachua County will be the home of the first program like this. So the idea is that we will use research in the gifted and talented world to identify and serve children in the foster care system. And so we will identify those children who have behaviors that are consistent with high intelligence and aptitudes and give them the care and the services that they need, children that are ages 14 to 17 years old. Every year in the Florida foster care system, 1,000 kids age out and go into the world, and many of them will end up homeless, incarcerated, and jobless. And so dating back to the 1970s, a report was provided to Congress called the Marlin Report that said gifted and talented children who do not get their needs met suffer the same way any other population of children who don't get their needs met. We've studied the brain since, and we know that there's physiological differences in the brain of those high ability youth, and so they need those services. And even in 1978, Shirley Chisholm spoke out that we are not providing enough services for gifted and talented students for minority populations and disadvantaged populations. And so Xavier House will be the first of its kind foster group home that won't be looking at the deficits and all of the things that are wrong with the child, but will be looking at their strengths and looking to build them. So our service array will include an on-site education program where they'll do online education for the first part of the day, and then enrichment and acceleration for the rest of the day, so that we can begin to build these children up. We'll have access here in Alachua County to mentors and volunteers who have lots of niche interests. So if we have a young person who's interested in Arabic or Mandarin or chess, we have access to many, many people in the community who can come and volunteer. One of our non-specific thoughts along that is once you volunteered with a child long enough and you found that their parental rights have been terminated, some of these children are available for adoption. And so sometimes these very organic relationships occur. Independent living skills, so very hands-on, independent living skills that will help them prepare for adulthood. And then again, that college readiness, skilled trade readiness, apprenticeships and skilled trades are very important to our program. And so the outcomes for this program will be foster care, children who are in group homes graduate high school at about 35%. We believe we can double that among our students. Children in foster care, despite having vouchers and stipends, only enroll in college at about 8% and only graduated with degrees at about 3%. We think we can triple that to 24%. Reduced juvenile justice. These are the kids that are looking for excitement and different ways of really blowing off that mental steam. And so giving them an opportunity to use those talented. Yes. So the idea is that we're in our capital fundraising campaign. So we are looking to create our inaugural campus here in Alachua County. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen input or items that are not on our agenda? Seeing none, move along. There are field report. So it's really interesting that straight out the gate that we had some conversation. I didn't really have a chair report because the trust has not really, in my opinion, really had a whole lot to report on since I've been chair. And Maggie took care of all the heavy lifting. We're kind of in this holding pattern since I become chair. But I did I wanted to just kind of make some comments to share with our board members, because we all have received the update that our EG sends out to us weekly, and in that EG report that she's updated and sent out, I think 2 weeks ago, was mentioned a suggestion that was shared with what was a call that was put on by the United Way staff for the youth providers that they fund, called Turn and Curve meeting, where they kind of give updates on. But this is like a special Turn and Curve meeting, because I missed the others. But normally, what the Turn and Curve meetings with United Way are about is that the funders, the programs that they fund, organizations that they fund, each of their categories, they have periodic meetings where the providers give updates on their programs or share things with each other. It's kind of a little, I guess, a little brainstorming type thing with updates, status update and brainstorming. It's a special one convened meeting, I think with the intent of Sharon's mention with myself, and from the school board and Ms. Kiner from the trust. And during that meeting, one of the participants on there made a suggestion about, which was shared by me, about the trust possibly funding positions that would be folks that would be subject matter experts inside the trust. And I wasn't really clear exactly on, because she was really trying to not to hog the time and be really efficient in getting to it. So, pretty much what the summary that was kind of gave to us in the update was that Dr. Moss had suggested there be 4 positions funded for each of our, initiatives: health, educated, safe, and supported. So there would be a person that would be employed by the trust, and there would be an amount allocated, and she just threw out an amount like a salary and benefits package or whatever, like $100,000. But so I called Sunshine because I wasn't sure about that, because I shared with you all, you guys can be more like those who've been with us from the start. And we talked about the lake and the dead fish, that analogy a lot, and wanting to change systems and have the things that the work that the trust fund be to change systems, to be system effective. And, since the inception of the trust and it started, we funded several, we've been a funder of programs that all of them have not really been well coordinated. There were 3 that I think the intent initially was for them to be coordinated. And then we started, funding some things. But even with the amount of money that we have pushed out into the community, we're meeting the needs. There are a lot of needs out, and there are a lot that we're not addressing, but we still have not gotten to that system thing. And so I thought it was a little ironic, like that Dr. Moss was saying what she said on the call after what came about from the previous meeting where we had the 3 participants, I think Genesis, Mirror Image, and I can't think of another way, other one, it's in our minutes for this meeting. Mr. Campbell's, I think was his name. And, it was really saying, we wanted them to coordinate, and I can't recall which of our board members said they wanted the system changing. How is it going to impact the system? So I'm kind of saying a whole lot of words to say that really the suggestion that was made by Ms. Moss was when I look at it, I think it really is kind of appropriate. It does sit down in there, is that she said, also when I called her in that, we've done a needs assessment for summer a couple of years ago. We're now in the process of developing a strategic plan and doing a solution project. But even in doing all of that and spending that money, the knowledge base for what is happening resides outside of the trust. All we get is the report. Like our staff, this kind of doesn't have that background knowledge of human services work. I think, I'm not sure what Christy's Goldwire background is. She does the program analysis with the folks who do our compile the data that comes through with that. They tell us how many children we serve, each of the programs, the questions and things, but it's really not anybody who has knowledge in the trust that can write an RFP that is looking at the system that needs to be changed, and really kind of evaluate things when they come in and say, well, this is something that we're trying to address, and that's really what's going to happen. So in my report, I just kind of really want to maybe have us have an open mind and have possibly when we have one of our workshops and extended meetings, that's coming up in April and May, that we possibly have her come in and really to talk about that and maybe get us, because we had one of our citizens that stood up today and says, wanting to us to have in the fund programs as we enter into the budget cycle, that is going to be system changing. And I don't think, us as board members, we each come with our individual backgrounds. I think a lot of us have been, we've been in tune as much as we can to supporting the organization, supporting the work of the trust has and changing the leadership. But I do think kind of us being able to come together and bring the passion that we have in our skill set and with some direction and possibly really, really trying to analyze the program that we're funding, because we are funding taking into the people who are doing the work. And one of the instances that you said is we have a literacy crisis in our country. But nobody in trust can really evaluate the work and the things that and propose programs you said we could fund for the providers. And perhaps it would be really good we have University of Florida here that we pay them to do professional development of the providers or somebody that can work with the providers on the literacy. Because we have several organizations that are trying to help the students, like Great Leagues is doing their job, but they don't have a lot of staff. They're limited by their funding, unless we're like their major funder, they're reaching kids. But if that is something that is really impacting the literacy skills of those students that they're serving, the older students, maybe we should be doing more of that, because that is a crisis that we have. So I just thought that it was, she shared some really good, feedback on the Zoom call, and then so I reached out to her because I really wanted to explore more of what I not really more about what she's saying, but I think she really kind of wanted something to get to us to where we are not just treating one fit that is washed up on the ground, or a multitude of issues washed up on the ground, and we really need to really look at our way, because we have systems here that are just kind of in place that either gaps in services, or systems that are operating in such a way that they are negatively impacting students.
I think that it's part of the conversation we need to have before we start funding along the lines of priorities. And I think having dedicated staff is one approach. The other is when we do solicit an RFP, would be to then convene a group of experts in that area, so that we're not relying on a full-time position or 4 FTE, which takes a lot of money out of the program, but rather just in time convene who can better evaluate what goes into an RFP, and then how you evaluate the responses. I think there's change science, and I think there's expertise in whatever, but it's literacy or mental health or whatever we're finding. But I think we have to have that conversation in the context of what came from the listening session and what strategically the priorities are going to be. So I think for April, and maybe we need another slightly longer meeting in May if we need to continue that conversation. But I think that's where it belongs. It's part of how do we set our strategic direction. The way I think about strategic planning is what are we trying to accomplish? What is required to fund that, those two together, and then what things do we need to do really, really well, and what resources do you need to do those things really, really well? And that's an iterative process. So I think that's a conversation that has to all happen together. My 2 cents.
And then sort of an inventory for result, because I think it is the case that there are a number of folks in schools doing this work, right? Maybe even for wise of everything, it's yeah, right. And so, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's like an inventory, but also strategic planning, whether it's who's in, who's not there, who could be there.
Yeah,
How do they weave together?
I think the inventory does need to be done, and I think United Way has done something that we're out there to see is what I was covering sunshine, but I think they and when we're convening a group of experts, I think You have to look at that. If you're bringing people, they have to have the capacity, one, and then the time to be able to commit to that. And I think one thing that I am really sensitive to is if we're doing things that's purely on a volunteer basis, that there may be some people who have an expertise, but they can't afford to come and bring their time. So you may exclude out a lot of people, like they're volunteers, they're people that volunteer. I tell people, a lot of times in circles that I run, that people of color, it's not that they don't want to volunteer and that they're not concerned about an issue, but they don't have the time and they're not able to afford to work for free.
So we pay consultants. I mean, there are different approaches we can be in that, but yeah, but I'm not sure having permanent positions, but again, we need to, I can't be that foundation that's not in a context.
No, I agree, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I just want you to be open to what I'm saying.
Oh, there's multiple approaches and I don't know which one makes sense, and so we put it in the context of a whole.
Tina, the other thing that I would say especially is the experts I would define not just as people that would say are experts, but
Right.
people who are actually doing work are the real experts.
I agree, and people who are impacted by it.
Exactly.
Sometimes asking the folks who are impacted and you need it in a lot of their voice about her.
Exactly. Well, those are some discussions too that I think are really important as we convene, you know, whatever.
Do that in our feelings and evaluate.
I do think the Fits for Initiative, I have to say, is designed to be more of a systemic change approach. And I do think that it has helped set the context for challenging us to think in that direction. And I because I worked most closely with, I can honestly say that I don't know that she and her staff are trying to take the systemic approach to it, but they're running up against exactly the things we're just talking about. And I think the summer programming is another good example. We did the best we could at the time with what we knew, but now we know a lot more, right? And after school and all of this. So I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying I think we've been learning. And maybe we're at a point now where we need slightly different.
Yes,
And I just have a quick comment that talking about systems change is really difficult for people to understand. We all understand programs. We get that. We've been doing that since the beginning of the millennium, right? But when you switch from a program to a system thought, it requires a whole new skill set in your own brain in order to evaluate and to anticipate what is needed. And that's why you guys will continue to hear me be a broken record, because it took me years to understand the difference between those two concepts. Now that I finally get it, it seems like every meeting I see another reason to bring it up again. And we all need to get in the mind meld, in the same boat, rowing all in the same direction, understanding what we're talking about by systems changing. And I don't think our community is ever going to stop coming, asking us about programs. And I'm not saying it's a distraction. It's just that we need to think differently about this whole notion of funding a good program versus changing the lake. I'm glad you brought that up.
I think an outcome.
Well, I think along the same lines that we will have to change how we evaluate, because the way we're evaluating ourselves now, the programs, it's who we serve, how many people we serve. We're not evaluating how well or effective it is. It's
Outcomes.
it's not outcomes, it's just, it's all to, we serve 10 people, we serve,
We've looked at effort.
so, yeah.
Yes, more ephemeral, the bigger your. It's not always a concrete thing.
Yeah, Tina, I want to thank you for bringing that up. You know, when I think about where we started, I am brought back to that meeting of Dr. Hart's heat map. When Lee and I were county commissioners, and we didn't even have any funding for that initiative. And I go back to Ann Caserva talking about changing the lake. But then I go to this page, which is tab 6. And tab 6 says goal 1 this year we funded for goal 1, 700,000, 300,000 on out. Goal 3, we funded 500,000 and 500,000 went out. And goal 4, we funded 100,000, so 900,000 went out. So those 3 goals, we have funded 1.3 million. And then on the programming side, to your point, Tina, we've funded a lot of programs. We don't have any unallocated there, 4.6 million. So are we matching the funding of our dollars to the changing of the systems? We're not. We just aren't. And we have said year after year, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. And I'm hoping this year we make a big stride and a big shift of getting there. We're not gonna get all there in 1 year, but I hope we really look at that funding towards what our original goal was.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Do you want me to talk about this now, or you want me to wait till we do that? I said I'd bring up, because that's exactly what I can bring up, this whole prioritization. So, you want to do it now, you want me to do it?
Are board members all amenable to that, or you want to? Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Instead of on the same topic.
This also encompasses the thing that I pulled off of. Y'all look on page 115 of your agenda report. You see that the revenue totals for this year, it said it's 14,224,000, blah, blah, blah. Of that, we have to, $2 million for the capital campaign for what we need to do. So we got that $12 million.
Where are you? Page 1. Right, go ahead.
Okay, so, if you flip to page 152, which is item 13, it says that it has that number of 12,224,000. But then if you look at the forecasted budget for 2024, our funding service is about $11 million. So you see that our so as we go forward, our fund balance is about $11 million. And we have this year our budget was close to $9 million. Next year we'll go up a little bit. Did you get that? Did you have to talk about that?
Yeah, Robert Fraser said that we should expect something very similar to last year. 9 to 11%.
Okay, so you said so that would be close to if our budget next year would be close to $10 million.
At another 10%.
Right. So as we're going forward in these discussions, we have approximately we have a couple $1 million to talk about as far as what we can spend. That we talked about how much, we talked about how much money we have, how much money. Well, we really don't have that much money. And so I think we need to be very judicious about how we go, we go ahead and spend whatever money we have there, because topic of conversation, we're talking about $2 million for some cap. If we're going, we have to make a decision as a board. We're going to lease something, or we're going to buy something, or we're going to work with the county. And I think we're having a meeting with y'all, with the county commission next month. So I think that needs to be a major discussion to see, is that something that we can do? And if so, how much more are we going to need? Because $2 million is not much as far as in the current real estate market. It's not much for building. And so, we need to think, do we need to hold back something, or is that what we want to do? Do we spend on kids, or we want to lease? What do we want to do? That's a major point before we go into talking about what we're going to do as far as programming is concerned. What I'm going to bring up now is that we're going to get we're going to hear about our strategic vision and all that's going into it. Now, because I am on the committee and there are a couple other members, I've seen, I've gotten some sort of feedback. However, it's not really, there are two things that I've noticed. But one is, doesn't really address the whole prioritization issue that we're going to deal with or need to deal with. Number one. Number two, because of the way the strategic plan is structured and who they're interviewing, it does a great job with middle school and high school Not so much for 0 to 6, because how can they participate? Hard to interview, children that age. So what I think that we need to do, and I think it's essential, imperative, you put in the synonym, that we have a meeting sooner than later, before we deal with that RFP. Because in that RFP, we're gonna come, we have something that we have to think about. We can do the RFP like we've been doing, perfect point, Tina, how we do measurables, or we can say, here are our priorities. And because these are our priorities, let's say obesity is one of the things that we think is very important. With the after-school programs, the summer programs, tell us what you're going to do to address obesity. And actually incorporate some of our goals into their programs and say, we want this in our, we want this is important to us. That's number one. Number two, what we have to do, I think, as I said, sooner than later, all those measurables that we were given, what's the name of the report?
Oh, our environmental scan.
The environmental scan, which compares us to the state and what it was this year, last year. I think it's that we have to go through that and we have to establish what do we want to change. And before we do the RFP, so that we can say, this is important to us, how are you going to address it? And you need to figure out how, based upon that, how are we going to prioritize our funding? So I would strongly, and I hope there's enough people on the board willing or have the time to, if their schedule permits, that before we do the RFP, and I know y'all will bring back next.
You're talking about the after school.
Yeah.
The after school RFP.
That we meet before them, we go through that part, and actually it won't demand much from staff because we've got the information. And it's us to sit down and say, this is important to us, this isn't important to us. Oh, well, this is, and I think how we should look at it is not the age, but say which one has a generational changing factor in it, as opposed to which one is going to help the children not slide. And then we kind of figure out, how in that do we want to do? We want to spend X amount on generational changes and ones that we have to have that's imperative that we deal with now, because we don't want to see them go, we want to see them maintain, or maybe get a little better, but it's probably not going to be generational. And I think that those are very important points that this board needs to have before we do the RFP and before we do any of the funding coming up. And I've heard 5 other people say it in this meeting. So I would hope that the board will meet, can come up with a time to meet, to help the staff say, because I know staff, we give them these directions, but we haven't established those priorities. I mean, we've got them listed, but there's a whole bunch of parameter indicators in there that we need to focus in on, because there are a couple of them, Ken, you're absolutely right. Like the safety thing, we want to see anyone on that. And really, how much can we do? Is that really where we're going to focus our money on? I know that when we were doing Success by 6, unplanned pregnancies was a huge deal. Is there something that age appropriate that can happen in the after school programs or the summer class or summer programs that can address, not necessarily sex per se, but say, okay, here's all the responsibilities that go with having a child. And this is what's going to happen if you have a child, both to the parent and to the child, because it has, it's going to be really hard for the parent, it takes a very special human being to overcome, as a young, teenager, and having a chance to be successful in life, and, heaven knows, unless you got, the system in place, it's going to be difficult for the child too. You can see I'm pumped up.
But the thing is, too, like in addressing some of these things, I think we have to define, like, there may be a difference of opinion. Like you saw it as education. I see it as occupancy, like occupying children, keeping them involved in something. So it's not necessarily, and I'm not saying it's not the only thing. I think that's part of it. I think having safe spaces and places, activities, and things that, because I'm saying, somebody did my ear yesterday, like 30 minutes saying what we don't have for kids countywide to keep them busy.
You're right.
There's no place for children, and you got this increase in violence, this increase in things, and there's like, I construct about this, and I was like, God, I got to those started believing that the parent was, time, so. But those are,
When I was first on the commission, when I was, gung ho and actually got some money to do after school programs, so I understand totally. But it's the after school program keeping them occupied, which is, I think, very, very important. Is not going to change, it's not going to break that cycle. And so we need to decide how we're going to budget, changing generations and occupying children. Both are important, but how do we want to come down? So that's a discussion that we need to have, and you see where it comes.
So I think
I'm done. Thank you.
there is going to be, and I don't see it going away, look at the crowd in there, right? A constant tension between a huge number of good, underfunded, needing support programs that are already existing. And this thing we want to do over here, which is system change. And so I used to see this in the mental health world all the time. It's like, oh, we don't want to fund prevention because we've got so much expense at the deep end. Well, you're always going to have expense at the deep end if you don't fund services at the front end. And so the question becomes, how for a period of time do you support both of those sides? And I think what we have to say is if these have priorities, then the programs that we fund, the existing programs, have to work toward those same priorities. And how can we help them do that? And how can we help them organize so we move them in that direction? Because otherwise, we're always going to be faced with, I'm going to die tomorrow if I don't get an extra boost of funding, versus this whole change the lake idea. So I think that we can demonize the fish maybe as opposed to
But you're saying in our RFP, say, how does your program?
right, how really
Systemically change?
right, and how can we work together? How can you collaborate to make sure that there are warm handoffs between levels? How do you work together? Because we are always going to have this tension there. There's not enough already in the community. The systemic change adds cost to that. So how do we make sure that the programs are moving toward a different set of priority functional areas?
And I think that's something when we have a Children's Services Advisory Board, and maybe it's because we had just that little pot of county money, which we were very grateful for. But instead of like saying we just want to fund event programs, we really said, and there's several of us who were on that, but we said, what do we want those outcomes to look like? And then we said, we want this to be the outcome. You as a community build it, bring it back to us. So we didn't try to be that expert in everything. We tried to say, this is the outcome we would like to see. Tell us how you would make that happen. Figure it out as when you are the community of experts. Please bring it back to us. And we had some very innovative ideas that were brought back. And so that's what I see. We've kind of been missing with this board. I think we got kind of in the sound of millions. It sounded like a lot at the time, but we've just been throwing money at programs instead of saying what was the outcome we wanted.
The need comes to us, and so we fund it as opposed to saying, okay, but wait a minute.
Absolutely.
And I think we did the best we could at the time with that, but I think there's more that we could do. If we go back and look at those RFPs and see what else we have learned that needs to be in there that wasn't wrong. But it was just our first attempt, because that's what y'all charged us to do, remember? That was what y'all told us we had to go away and do. I mean, the county commission, because we were dependent on it.
And thank God y'all did it, not the county. So.
well, I mean, I won't go into that. She's not gonna hire, and then we'll move on. Did you have something?
Yes, yes.
I
I wanted to return to the notion that if we ask our after-school programs to do a new thing that's outside of their expertise, maybe they can rise to it, but maybe there is a third party who can be the meta program that can go to all the after-school programs and contribute the safety part. No one's going to send their kid to safety camp. I did not send my kid to safety camp. But if you send a safety expert to every camp and teach every counselor there and every child there what we mean when we say we want to have a safer community, that's how we do it. We have expertise in these areas. And the obesity one that Tina brought up, that's a very interesting one. We have expertise in that too. And I just wouldn't expect our already somewhat overburdened after-school programs and summer camp programs to suddenly say, okay, let's figure out how to do this or do that the trust wants us to do. I think we tell them, no, we haven't, but you have to allow it into your program. You will, if you want our money, you're going to allow this expert into your program with your kids for the period of time.
So.
And I call those meta programs. I made that up. Okay? Like the overarching thing that will address some of these goals we haven't even funded because we can't figure out how.
It's why we try to incorporate sort of the enrichment fund, we fund some enrichment that they weren't gonna do the summer camp themselves, but they could go to the other summer camps and provide some enrichment, enhancement, whatever you wanna call it. I think that's, yes.
Situations. So can I make a motion that we work with staff to come up with a time on an ASAP
Another, because we got one and right at the beginning of April, you know.
Well, we have one with the steering committee on the third.
this we need half a day out of that. At least. To come up with a list of priorities. That we have. And at some point, put this in motion. If you don't want it in motion, that's fine too. I would like to see what y'all have come up with as far as for the early portion of the child's life. That y'all have done research, just to see if there's something out there that we're not doing. You know, just for board education.
So, and to that, I would like to add children with disabilities. Because
That's
that's something that has, you know, that's getting pummeled with that.
But
I mean, we're you know, and I don't want it to be that where the group are against each other. That's, I don't like that analogy. I really don't. And I felt that tension for the whole time that this board has been in existence. And I don't want, but the group shouldn't compete. But
I
children with disabilities, we have not, I don't know what because I missed the workshop that were the results of the listening project that they discussed in that last.
Mental health.
Mental health, no, is good to discuss. But I would like the majority of that I personally would like the majority of that time, not for presentations, but to work on that priorities where we can go through and figure out what we think are priorities. Because I haven't seen anything in being a member of the strategic planning committee, and correct me, I haven't seen anything in the preliminary data that is really going to change the goals per se.
Right.
That the goals that we have now are pretty good goals. And we go through and prioritize which ones we think have the capability of mind and generation. So that my motion is that bring back the disabilities, the youth, and find a date.
So I have a motion to direct staff to set a workshop that we bring back some what?
It's priorities.
Prioritization?
Yes, to bring back, we will be handed those the data that has been provided to us on a couple different times. We will analyze that, use that data with our goals to figure out which ones we think we can make systemic change. So staff really doesn't have,
Set the priorities.
staff really won't have to do a whole lot, and except for part of the information was.
Finding a date.
And
But I don't think there's a motion about that.
Yeah.
It's not a motion. I think it's Saturday. I heard it say Saturday, 7 days for a workshop.
And we heard you.
okay.
We don't think it's going to say, I think.
But I do want it to happen before we do the RFP.
Well, second, I have a question. Leah, would you imagine at some level of discussion about, we have $10 million. How much money should we be allocated to these different priorities? Or do you just want to have kind of a soft discussion for staff and then bring back a budget recommendation?
I think that to take the burden on staff, we need to have a priority. We need to prioritize how we want the money, what are our goals? And then, and part of that discussion will be, which one is going to make a generational change, and which one do we need to do to maintain, to make sure that nobody slips.
How much money do we want to allocate to systemic changing outcomes versus maintaining providing?
And in that meeting, I don't know that we want to necessarily talk about money, that we just had a general discussion. And then as we look at when we do the budget, when we actually go through the budget, we have that information for us, say, if we decided on this, now let's implement it in the budget.
When does workshop be after we get our workshop that's gonna be in April?
And there was kind of start this discussion where I talk about fund balance.
Yeah.
Right, I presume.
Yes, is it fund balance or unallocated? Unallocated, not fund balance.
So you're taking,
Fund balance is a whole other conversation in my mind. Because it's one time money. Or several year money, but not.
Well,
The
reason I brought this up,
We can use several year money.
it's, well,
It'd be a
some,
lot for several years.
the reason I brought this up is number one, to bring up, we don't have as much as I think we have. Number one, and number two, we do have to figure out what we're gonna do about, a structure where we're gonna house this organization. And what impact that is going to have, because that's one time, and as a result, what happens? But also, before we have the RFP, because that's limited, we have an opportunity to do, we've all said, we haven't really done it because we were learning, we haven't had the opportunity to say, we would like to see this, we would like to see this, and I think we've had that opportunity. Now, you have to do it before the RFP. No, I'm saying how the meeting.
Well, no, I don't think that's emotional, Leah. I'm here. I think it is really just a workshop and just to set on the table, set it on
The
the
motion, yeah, y'all, you said that there's not necessarily a motion. This is part of the discussion.
you may,
No, I mean, Kim, there was no motion a second, something, that was no motion second, we just needed to set a workshop date, I think it's still, and we have something coming up, we have a session coming up later on the agenda, we have a meeting on the 3rd, April 3rd, and then I'm not sure when the RFP will go out, but maybe we have to figure out something between, the 3rd and whenever the RFP is to come out, so.
or could we make it there? I mean, you're not starting until 1:30 on the 3rd,
I have 1 o'clock. Is it 1 o'clock or 1:30?
and maybe one.
I got wherever we have to send the time to start.
so staff just told me that the RFP could go out in May. So let's not worry about that. We've got the time to do an after school RFP. We can put that out in May to allow us time to do what you all need to do, because we really shouldn't be putting anything out.
So maybe a second different time in April.
Yeah, and let's do that by Google. We want to like.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for doing that. All right, we've got a big conglomeration here of chairs and board discussion. We'll now have our executive director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will keep it brief. Just wanted to highlight a couple of items for you all. Our business leadership class is continuing to meet monthly. They held their second, where's Mia? Yes. Their second class here at the Trust on February 25th. It was a marketing session where they discussed branding, social media, messaging, and trademarking for their early learning centers. They will be meeting again this Saturday to talk about finance. All right. So we are continue to be excited about the work that they are doing.
you all know that our steering committee met, they also met on the 25th. We had what I felt was a really good session, good discussion. Long day, but really good day of looking at the response from the community. And we are going to be meeting virtually Friday, and then of course the meeting that we will have with you all. The discussion you just had is right in line with where we're going with all of this. The purpose is for us to determine what we're going to fund, what the trust is really going to look like. So it was a really good meeting. One good news report and then one sort of sad report to provide to you all. Good news report, Mia Jones has been selected as a, let's see, let me get this right, a Rockwood Leadership Institute fellow. She is one of 20 to participate in the inaugural 2023 Prenatal to 3 Leaders Fellowship. He is doing great work for us. And then our sad news to report, Dan Douglas, our communications manager, is leaving us at the end of this month. And so we just want to publicly say thank you to Dan for the work that he's done with the trust since 2020.
Yes.
Since 2020, and that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I continue to be blown away with my Friday evening reading. That's kind of the way you are circling back and talking to and listening to the community is impressive beyond my. Thank you.
All right, so we're taking care of item 7. I'm sorry, steering committee, you have any report?
Yeah, no, that was, I mean.
What's the kind of stuff? All right, so the presentation, no, we can send, we're stopping that there, we address what you want to say there. You have something,
That was what you wanted to say, okay. I didn't know, I thought you were doing 12 pages. So even by 7 is okay. Yes. So do we need, vision to that?
so, no, we can just talk now, so, hold on.
7 is so I would move you to trust the sheet of monthly budget because I don't think we're good.
Second, any discussion? All in favor? I'm sorry, citizen input on our budget review, item 7. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposers?
Say opposed.
Any opposers? It was not, okay. One opposed, saying. You already did that.
Any opposers? Opposed.
Here to say,
Sorry. Old business, Chris Berry, children's initiative, you have something?
Sorry.
Sort of cool income.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm here to give an update on the Preston Children's Hospital, grant and also provide an update on the early learning network. So in February, we submitted in the ED report, updated what we had done or what I have done thus far, and with reporting out at this meeting. So a couple of reminders. Here's my next slide. Here. All right. So just to remind you of what the Pritzker objectives are, the first one, let me first before I start. If you reviewed your packet before, the presentation looks slightly different, so there's some updated slides in there. But moving into the objective one, it's an increased participation rates of those living below 200% federal poverty level by 17% annually in existing federal, state, and locally funded maternal and infant health programs. And those programs are like Healthy Start, McBee, Newborn, Healthy Families. And if you look at the graphic that's in there, some of the things that we've been doing is our system map, being a part of FACT itself. And then of course, there's some things that we haven't done, which is like develop an app for increased engagement. The second objective is improving the quality and availability of early care and education services by increasing the percentage of accredited providers. And this kind of already talked about the update with the LI Masterclass. We also have the Accreditation Academy that fits into that. And we partner with that with the Greater Gainesville Chamber along with the Early Learning Coalition. So these are our numbers so far. So when you look at these numbers, and I'm going to explain it a little bit, you see our baseline numbers, what we put into the grant when it was first written. And then you have year 1, year 2, and year 3 increases. And I changed this slide. You've seen it before. Last time may have been March of last year. But you've seen it before, but I changed it to represent a little bit more of what Pritzker looks at when they are looking at what our increases are. So the total expansion that when we started this grant, that they were told based on our goals is 1,073. However, just year 2 alone, we have a total of expansion since December 31st of 1,409. You'll see a couple of things that say no increases. It's not that they did not go up. It's that we just need to be able to figure out what's wrong with the data here. And that's something ELC and I are trying to figure out. So even without counting that data alone, we still have already met our expansion goal. We have year 3. Year 3 is what we expect to make. And this is year 3 current. Before I move on, is there any questions about that impact?
Where's year 3? 130 is year 3? Right, that's what you expect.
So that's what we expect. So Connect, home visiting, newborn home visiting programs, those are all things underneath Healthy Start and Healthy Families. Those are all of their services. So the expectation that they will increase to another 130, they'll increase to another 65, and they'll increase another 60.
From the baseline?
From the year before.
From year 2.
Yeah, year 2.
But year 2 goes from year 1 and year 1 goes from baseline?
Correct. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, what is S one?
I'm so glad you asked. I meant to type it all out. School readiness. So school readiness is that fund that ELC is that school readiness is a subsidy for families that may be that are above 150. So 150% of the federal poverty level, and they have to meet certain certain criteria in order to get ELC funding. One of them being that they have to be employed, working, or looking for work, or in school.
Okay, so on that, the increased number of children 0 to 3 actively participating in which the baseline was over 2,000, and then there was an increase over that 2,000 of 276.
Yes.
And then when you add those two together, the year 2 there was only 16 over that added number.
Right.
Okay, and all right, and then I guess with early care in education, where it says, no increases, they're working on that, trying to figure out the number. Y'all are working on more than to create a situation where the schools, are a better opportunity for children to learn and have you putting additional children in those classes?
So yes, there are additional children in those classes, but the issue with the data is not necessarily the kids that are in the classes. What's happened is that we've lost some workforce that looked at the data one way and the ones who are there now are looking at it differently. So just trying to figure out where the error is in the data itself. And that may mean that we have to go back to fix the baseline, or it may mean that we can go forward with what we have. So we just have to figure out where the problem was created. One thing that I've learned about all ELCs is that they don't really have, I don't want to say they don't own their data, but in the way they don't own their data, it's at a state level. So when I need to request information, they have to go to the state department to actually get exactly what I need.
I think the other important thing, no reserve is free, right?
Correct.
And so it's one thing that we know, and we saw in the survey, the listening results that we got, everyone everywhere has a persistent problem with infant toddler slots, really fear and center-based programs. And the pandemic only exacerbated it, because what we need to do is think about who in those classrooms, which were the groups of children that were not able to be vaccinated. Children 5 and under. So the workforce left from a variety of these.
So having what you mean is there are not enough openings.
There's not enough capacity. There are always huge waiting lists if they could convert to. So that's a huge issue, but there's also, and Herman has much more specific data about this, and we pulled that to the right place. But this is the reason Pritzker focused on birth to 3 is because of what we know about the importance of children not being in really low quality classrooms during the first 3 years. I mean, if you're just laying on that, it's all day, and no one's being I'm not saying that it's happening, but that's what Pritzker puts so much of an emphasis on the birth to 3. The issue.
And I just had a quick question for me, which totally relates to this thing of what happened during COVID. We kind of count on you and the other experts that are working on this, and maybe Herman could help, to explain to us when we see these gigantic increases, should we be dancing a happy dance, or should we be realistic and say, no, this is really a normal trend after COVID? And I'm a real nerd about numbers like this, and I have to see the year on year change, because we should see a dog leg. Something's going to go down, it's going to come back up. But before we do any happy dance, we have to see where it was before it went down. Did it barely make it back to where it was, or did we exceed that? Because then if we drew an imaginary line from before COVID and after COVID, we could go, yeah, we're doing really good.
So I really learned a lot of lessons during COVID. Number one, how to be innovative. When we talked about, I think when Healthy Start staff came in, they talked about a little bit about not being able to get into the hospital and what that meant when it impacted their numbers, and then how creative they had to get to even see moms or families all together. Same thing happened with early care. They had to be able to get creative with being able to figure out how, if I have to close down a whole center, and now not only do kids not have anywhere to go, parents have to stay home with their kids, I also have a workforce that can't get paid. So when we look at these numbers, yes, sometimes we can do a happy dance, but what it is that there's been some flexibility for the creativity that they've had to create. To me, I won't really be able to see the outcome. It won't be until, to me, past year 3 when I can really see what the impact of all of that is, what lessons we're able to keep,
For example, WIC, they were able to do a lot of creative things to bolster these numbers. Well, a lot of those things are getting ready to be rolled back. You know, families are going to have to come back into, come back into the clinic, and there was a lot of good things that came out of the things that the federal government came up with, and I'm sure there's more to come, but even those things may impact what their numbers look like this year and next year, but they're hopeful because for them, workforce was an issue, it is not this year. So for them, they at least have the people in place to make things happen where they can.
Yes. Is this a place where we can, with additional resources, start to create systemic change in outcomes?
Yes.
And do you have enough data where you can bring back some recommendations for us that can, because remember, this is where I'm really interested in allocating. What did we learn that really worked? But we don't have enough funding, but with doubling the funding or tripling the funding or moving our funding or allocating fund balance for 3 years, you know, this can start to really change things.
So I do. I can skip all the way to the last slide.
No, I mean, I want to say.
So I want to remind you of this lovely pedal that we've been following, the health, early learning, development, family leadership and support, and how that surrounds thriving children and families. It is what we've been using on the way since I got here. And it's what we've been following when we look at things. We do the same thing here when we're looking at all of our different programs. It usually fits in one of these hats. What I'm going to talk about next is what's in the early learning and development and our family leadership and supports. And I can give some updates too as they follow if you need them. So these are our current supports. This is what we're currently funding underneath those hats that fit birth to age 5. So we brought on Help Me Grow Alachua, which has a 5-year contract. And then of course, we have the family partner, which also we brought that person in as well. And you already know about the newborn home visiting program, the transformative professional development. And we've already talked about the Business Leadership Institute and Accreditation Academy. Gainesville Thrives also falls underneath that, and so does Project Youth Build Parenting Program and the Family Resource Center, the Community Navigator falls underneath that. So here's where I make my recommendation. So we've done quite a bit to be able to look at these things, and I've heard the words programs, funding, but exactly what y'all talked about earlier in the meeting is actually my recommendation. That we actually take the moment to, knowing what our budget looks like, gather all that data from all our different sources, utilize the listening to our findings and our strategic plan, because I can't do a plan without those two things. We're right in the middle of those things, and that we utilize the local state findings for the future project. And I've talked about the future project before, that's the children's movement. They're here in our community, they're in the state, looking at early learning as well. They have some great data from Alachua County. And then of course, system mapping. And I haven't talked a lot about system mapping, but we have a wonderful person, a doctoral student at UF who's been working on our system mapping, Kaylin Shaw, Callan Shaw, let me say her name correctly. And she's been looking at that, but the next step in that is to review what those gaps look like. And some of those things will not be surprising to anyone. But what are those gaps, and we know what to fund. Then I'm going to recommend that we actually work with a local expert to help us develop that model, to help us look at what that data looks like, and that we do those work groups that we talked about before. So one of the things we talked about in February, we started when we wanted those 4 centers that are here in Alachua County. Well, without having some of this information, it would just be a conversation. I feel like we needed to have information to be able to empower that conversation and to be able to move it forward with other professionals, including caregivers. And then, of course, I'm also recommending that we create a comprehensive funding strategy and subsidy rate cost estimation tool. The second thing you asked is that we look at the last proposal from, I think it was the Child Center's proposal from years ago, where we had paid per child per day rate. However, when we look at those things, we may not have funds to do that this year, but when we look at those things, we need to be able to have a base for how do we do that in the future. What does our structure actually look like? What is our system support? What's the data? What is the evidence-based process that we're looking at to fund programs underneath this hat? And of course, I'm saying we need to share it. And of course, build public awareness and common language. The one thing I have learned is all of this is that parents still don't know where to go. They don't know how to find information. They have no idea when they are searching, and it doesn't matter if you are new to this country or you've been here forever, you still don't know where to go. And that to me is something that has to be, can improve upon if people, the services, along with the icings that are fun, icing is fun, of things that we can give them in one place to be able to say, this is what it looks like. This is what services we offer. Here, family is where you can get services. We may not fund everything, but we can certainly be a collaborator and convener of things. And that's it. Any questions? Oh, my last one is the continued community conversation. When Marcia came aboard, she was able to participate in one of our community conversations. And to we have these all the time. We don't, but there's no reason why we should not be able to have those community conversations to bring people together. We talk about experts, but sometimes the expert is the family as well. And so being able to include that family in those conversations as a part of who helps us build this quality improvement system. And then of course, the overlaying the annual community summit, which my understanding used to happen. So that's something that we should be able to look at and figure out how can we do that so that once a year, there is a discussion, there is people coming together to be able to look at all of this information. Any questions?
Questions? Fabulous report, thank you.
Could you just give us 2 or 3 sentences on this fellowship opportunity that you have? Like, where would you be? Who else is in it? What are you doing?
So I've been so focused on what's happening here at the trust that I haven't been able to look at all the other people who have been selected just yet. But I will leave for California, and that'll be the first leg of the trip. And then through that, we'll really be, in a way, be able to work together to look at the different systems of what early childhood looks like. When I hear Dr. Snyder's staff talk about all the things that are around the country, a lot of those people are in this fellowship. So to be able to talk to them about what their system looks like there, to be able to have someone that I can say, we tried this. What have you done? To be able to walk through that, it's to me, it's beautiful to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Sounds fun.
I think it's great that you're starting in California because of the size of Florida, and that would be helpful. Yes, congratulations. Well deserved.
And they put all their tobacco money into 0 to 5 and stuff like that.
Yes. Well, there are other reasons don't want it like else.
Thank you. That's not a lot of that. Item 12. Travel policy revision. Center.
We are revising the travel policy because, such as it was, all the different paragraphs referred to different policies, whether it were federal or state, or federal or state. And as you walk down each paragraph, you know whether or not it was federal or state. So each paragraph was referring to a different place. And it was wanting to be uniform, and of course it was confusing.
The only change was just that the highlighted to statute or whatever.
That's your, I'm moving over there.
Thank you.
Motion by Johnson, second by Alderman Cornell, any discussion? Discussion, any public input? Right, all in favor of receiving this document, this is on policy, aligning it with state laws, which is I, any opposed? Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I just want to, did everybody see the one pager next to your packet? Okay, just wanted to make sure. The one that was in your packet was incorrect, so.
I do have a request when we do these, can we get a red line version in the packet for the?
Yeah.
Actually, to make sure. that it's all possible. Thank you.
All right, item 13. Discussion of the summer RFP. Yeah, we did that. You're doing this. You probably did that. All right, so actually, item 13, our fund analysis report, fiscal 23. Unallocated money, balance recommendation.
All right. Well, we've began this conversation. The board requested at our March meeting that we bring back an update on fund balance and a recommendation for the use of our unallocated funds. It does not, our recommendation does not take into consideration the funding priorities that you all will be discussing with the steering committee. So I wanted to be very clear about that. What we did internally was we based our recommendations off of the amount of money that we know we have, the needs that we know we have in terms of folks who come to the board and ask for requests, our conversations with our providers, and our conversations with some folks in the community, our partners. Two of our recommendations that we are going to make to you are items that the board has already approved, but you wanted to know where the money was going to come from. So we'd like to pull the money from the unallocated fund. We're going to start with Diana walking us through fund balance, what that looks like. And then Christy is going to walk you through the actual recommendation. Okay.
So what you're seeing in column 1,
Where are we?
So you're under tab 13.
The first page, that 152.
this
Yeah.
page. Column 1. The fund balance currently as of the end of February is 16,000,003. But that includes the ad valorem taxes and the use of fund balance that was transferred in. So once we spend our budget, and I've highlighted everything that was approved, personnel, operating, property appraiser, programming 7.7. So our budgeted expenses are 12 million, which are coming out of that 60. Additionally, there's 2 million that we have all agreed not to touch because it's for the building. So that leaves you with 14. So that's a difference of 2,140,000 that you probably can spend, along with the unallocated, which we know from programming we haven't assigned. So that is a total of 3,000,008. However, what we're saying is we go to column 2. We don't have leftover fund balance as we currently are starting with at 16. If we don't spend that 2 million left over, then we can bring it in to next year. And if all else is the same, we don't know what's going to happen, if anything's going to increase, then we still have the 8.8, and for a total of 10,009,000 income.
assuming that staff does not get increases and assuming that our operating expenses increase by more or less 4%, it could be more. Tax revenue, property tax collector expense should be the same if income is the same. But Samus is going to cost 60,000 a year, we know that much. And keep our capital. We're going to wind up with a negative balance. Of course, that negative balance is assuming the unknown. We don't know what the rollback rate is gonna look like, or if we're even running the but tax expense, tax income. So I think what Marcia would like to recommend is that we stick to talking about using the unallocated program funds as opposed to the 3.8 million that may or may not be available.
Right. So you're going to hear our recommendation. Chris is going to talk about the specifics of the recommendation is to use about 1.6 million of the 1.7 unallocated dollars.
So before, so I understand why we're only gonna basically talk about unallocated. My question is, the fund balance is only as of February 28th. Haven't we had expenses for 5 months?
And that's where we are.
Right, but we're taking them out again down below with our total aid to private organizations of 7.7 and our personnel. That the roll forward that totals up to 12.2 million includes an annualized expense. But the fund balance, it's like we're double counting 5 months of expenses, I feel like. Am I missing something? Like, we're not taking fund balance as of October 1 and then subtracting out all the expenses. We're taking it as of 5 months later, and then we're taking out a full year of annualized expenses. Am I wrong?
That's kind of like how I was seeing it when it didn't sit well with me, but I took what Diana said when I did a general review. But I think the 1.3 million for personnel seems like it's not a full year amount either. Weren't we gonna hit 1.4 or something?
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at 8 private organizations of 7.7, and I just go to this. Right?
Yeah, I know what you're, I hear what you're saying.
This is 7.7 for the year. So that's a whole fiscal year. Fine for discussion today.
Yeah.
We can talk about unallocated, but I think we do have more fund balance than we made. I think we have 512 of a 40.
Chairperson, can I just respond to?
Yes.
I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah.
Because we're about to come out with a set of priorities from our strategic plan, and wouldn't it be dandy if we had a little bit of change dangling around in our pocket so that we can invest?
And that was also part of the reason why we did not want to make a recommendation for a full 1.7. We wanted to have some wiggle room in case something came out
You mean 3.8?
for the unallocated.
Yeah, we're making a recommendation for the
Right.
unallocated, the 1.7.
Right. But the recommendation is not for a full 1.7. There is some leftover.
Okay.
But there's nothing in this discussion about any proposal about which we have to have a discussion about what we're gonna do for a facility.
Correct.
I mean, that's a big
So
deal.
we've got 2 million.
Got two-
You have 2 million. Yeah.
Okay, we've got 2 million, but I don't think that can be enough. And I'm gonna be the only one here, but I'll, if you know what.
Well, I've been working with the realtor, and thus far, the pickings are slim. And the facilities that are, how can I say this? The nicer facilities cost more money, for sure.
So before we do really anything, I think that's gotta be part of, I mean, I see certain things on here that we pretty much gotta do. The things that we've allocated and that we've already given approval and, you know, and the programs that we're going from 9 to 12 months, you know, we gave them the same funding and told them that operated for 12 months. I don't think we have a choice. Make that right. And everything else, I think we need to wait till we have the budget discussion. There's programs on that I'd like to see happen, but I think to do anything today is premature, with the exception of those couple of days.
Even for the unallocated, when we're looking at sitting in our approved budget that's not allocated, you want to look at it, something on the unallocated. It's March. We got to do something on that allocated. It's going to be right in about. Yeah.
Well, I didn't say not on anything. That's one of the thoughts. We spend it, if we spend it, it's gone. And one time expenses like a building, it's exactly what you want to spend something like that.
So I think you're talking about fund balance,
Yes.
and then there's a suggestion of unallocated. That's in our current budget.
Right.
That's what I think Ken was at.
Okay, and also what's in here, we have to have a discussion about what's not in here is reserves. I don't think I saw reserves in there. We've got to have reserve, and how much reserves do you want? Because I think our current is 5%, which would be about, what, $4,400. And you think $4,400 is enough to hold the program together in a time of crisis? I don't think so.
5% of our fund balance.
Yeah, 5% of your operating budget is you have to hold the reserves.
Right. Okay. But not even 500. Yes, there is.
Okay.
Okay, so I think it's two different conversations where I'm involved at. I think what you're saying, the fund balance, let's table that one and let's talk about the unallocated budget amount that's in our current year's budget. Let's talk about that before we go to the fund balance. Let's not mix it. Let's talk about just what we have already in our budget that we said we were going to allocate to programming, but it's not allocated any place now. So I will open the floor now and let Member Cornell,
Which is part of the 7.7 million, the unallocated part of it. All right, we're good to go.
Oh, I did not sit there.
Yes, for Christine.
Oh,
I said you're used to it.
you know, great feeling, beauty, Christine.
I love presenting. So, we have in front of you, you should have an updated, copy of the presentation. There's slight revisions based on sponsorship added to the list of recommendations for the unallocated dollars. So the very first slide, you'll see the list. You guys will see the list. It's, like I said, it's slightly different. It added $25,000 for sponsorships. The next several slides, I'm going to provide a summary of everything that we are recommending for the unallocated dollars. I'd also like to note that when selecting some of the recommendations, the staff did consider what other funders may have been offering in the community. For example, the city of Gainesville is releasing many grants with their One Nation, One Project initiative, and releasing larger grants in September around $45,000.
Is that money that is coming from federal government?
I don't think, yes, there are usually some, yes, that is correct. I did attend their meeting that they had here in Gainesville. The mini grants will provide funding for arts and wellness initiatives to address issues that worsened over the COVID pandemic, and the city chose the youth gun violence prevention for that. And so as we were thinking of recommendations, we were considering what other funders in our area were funding also. So this first recommendation covers the funding needed for our summer camp performance and incentives. You all are very familiar with this. Last summer, we awarded about $88,000. And we are anticipating awarding about $100,000 in performance incentives for summer camps this summer. This was included in the RFP, which means that providers will have another opportunity for next summer to receive performance incentives again. When we are thinking about summer, we also included about $50,000 for the Greater Bethel A&E Camp Excellence. Pastor Ron Rawls at Greater Bethel hosted a summer camp for about 43 youth. It was a trust-funded camp, summer 21, excuse me. And then the trust released it the next summer RFP, and Greater Bethel did apply and was approved as an eligible provider, but was not funded based on points received from the volunteer review team. When considering the different ways to utilize these dollars, Executive Director Kinder asked staff to keep in mind increasing that number of summer camps that we had awarded funds to. And this one came to mind as eligible as well as capable, with offering an additional summer camp to children in 3 to 6 for 1 and 7.
Chris, there was a reason that they didn't, there was a cutoff, and they didn't make that cutoff. So did they, whatever issues that precluded them from reaching out, have they changed what they were doing so that they would?
There was nothing that they didn't do. There were a lot more camps that applied for the dollars. And if we had the same review team from year to year, they would have received all the points to receive the dollars. So there was nothing that they didn't do. It was a volunteer team. They rated them the way they rated them. He actually appealed it because he was wondering, what did we do differently? And he did have a really good camp. And they would have been the only camp that applied and didn't get funding that we would consider for these dollars.
Thank you. I have a question about that. So when it says additional camp services for 32641, that's the zip code, does that mean they're adding services that would incorporate that zip code? Is that what that means?
Yes, this would be a camp that does not currently exist because he could not, operate the camp without the system.
Okay. And can you tell me how long the camp is?
His camp lasted the full summer.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the amount that 43 kids over the whole summer.
Yes.
Okay, for that amount.
So for 8-9 weeks of summer camp.
It would be very expensive. It was just 1 week.
Right.
For the whole summer.
The whole summer. Yes. The next recommendation has to do with our Teens Work Alachua program. This is based on the board asking us to bring back to them where the additional dollars needed for the new approval for Teens Work Alachua. So I won't say much to that if you're aware of what that recommendation is for.
Christy, I don't know about you guys, like when I looked at this and reviewing the packet, to me, 116,000 for 2 staff people for just the summer to onboard. That seemed like a lot excessive to me, but I don't know.
Well, Goodwill added an additional 100 kids to their roster.
Yeah.
And so those dollars needed for Goodwill is supporting the additional 100 children and the staff that needs to be present for the coaching and the mentoring and the onboarding of the employers, as well as the readiness training for those people.
So does this mean to say to an additional 220 teams or, so I heard you say they're taking 100 more kids.
Right,
So
because we had,
like,
yes, they had 120 because we had 2 different contracts.
So does this represent the amount of funding that was with the other contract with NBL that's just being allocated to Goodwill now?
No, because we still funded minority business listing at $100,000 also.
So what does that bring the total funding for change work too.
Do you remember the total 86?
$800,000.
It was. While I'm talking, he can look up the contracts and we can let you guys know. If we can pull those two contracts and give us that total amount, and we'll bring it up to it. We can pull it, we have it in our system. The next two initiatives, staff are recommending two early learning initiatives. The first being the Summer Bridge program for families eligible for Alachua County Head Start. Healthy Start provides, or not Healthy Start, Head Start provides comprehensive developmental services for low-income preschool age children and social service supports to their families. The program provides inclusive services in the areas of health, mental health, nutrition, disability, and parent and community engagement activities. All children in Head Start are screened for developmental challenges, dental, vision, and hearing. And any identified concerns are referred to appropriate professionals for treatment. Head Start is a great program for lower income families, but unfortunately, this is only a school year program. These families are that are participating in Head Start do not qualify for the school readiness dollars that Mia mentioned earlier. These children from these families are the families with the lowest income in Alachua County, and as stated earlier, don't have that additional support from the state through EOC. And many of these families do not have the funds to support a year-round early learning education themselves. During the summer, these children are removed from the academic environment that they are accustomed to during the school year. So what we are proposing is an 8-week pilot program running from June 5th to July 24th, working with 164 children at 6 different centers spread out through the Alachua County area. The rate per child is $27.95. That is an update from the link that you received because I placed the information. And then the administrative cost. In the packet in front of you, you have all the but the administrative cost is zero. So we will be working directly with the Episcopal Children's Services to administer the funds to the center for those children, if approved, to attend their early learning classes as they had during the school year. And Episcopal has informed us that they have the funding from other sources to cover the administrative costs for this early learning initiative. Yes. Yes. Any questions about this before I go back to the teamwork Alachua?
What strategy goal are we calling it?
Go through. So the two contracts that I'm going to jump back in, the two contracts for Teams Work Alachua is $866,000, $496, which if you remember, you approved $866,500.
Still have that dollar, you couldn't come up with it, huh?
I said it before. The second early learning initiative is the Healthy Social and Emotional Development and Family Support Program. As Mia mentioned earlier, we have our early learning centers who are participating in the BLI program. We are always meeting with them, convening and having different discussions about what it is they need, what it is that the families need to support the children enrolled in our early learning centers in the county. And when talking to early learning educators, one of the top issues that has impacted the workforce is challenging child behavior. And although educators are receiving professional development in that area, parents may not always know what's being utilized in school or have received the same level of training to duplicate that implementation in the home. Additionally, what is working in the home may not be duplicated or implemented in school also.
This short-term funding recommendation would allow the trust the opportunity to expand what's already in place, develop a blended approach and pilot a program with a focus on family engagement and family support. Our implementation team would include the Early Learning Coalition's professional development manager, North Central chapter of Florida Association for the Education of Young Children, early learning educators, caregivers, and community partners who offer evidence-based family empowerment direct supports to children birth to 5. This project is early intervention and meant not to just work with challenging behaviors, but also setting the stage for behavior regulation for all children. Some of the evidence-based practices currently in our community include the pyramid model, circle of security, and the trust-based relational intervention, also known as TBRI. And then conscious discipline is also another model that is used in our area. Yes. The next recommendation is the mentorship and character building at $500,000. Over the last several months, trust staff, as well as the board, have learned many local mentorship programs in our area. Staff is recommending $500,000 to award 10 mini grants to provide operating programs that help Alachua County's youth build trusting relationships and self-esteem, create personal and academic goals, all while preventing truancy and delinquency. We see this as a funding opportunity for providers to apply for dollars to support their programming offered here in Alachua County. Based on this being unallocated dollars, this would be one-time funding that we're proposing to create an RFP for providers to apply for in June or July. It's one-time funding based on the fact that we are working on our goals and priorities for our, based on the information we received from the listing process.
That's
Going forward.
It says 10, so are you thinking 50,000 piece or?
Yes, yes. Go forward, that's correct. The next recommendation is the Emergent Needs Funds. This is an opportunity for the trust to support providers and to help them provide and to provide a safety net when there's a crisis situation that arrives that could potentially jeopardize the program or jeopardize the service that is being offered to children and their families. Again, this would be another funding opportunity where the trust has created invitations to negotiate, RFPs, and working directly with those providers in our area. These funds, we're recommending that this not only be available to those who we are already funded, but to providers in our area that are working with children, not just trust funded providers. And as mentioned earlier, staff would need to create an application that would include criteria, eligibility, guidelines for providers to apply for reimbursements. And then we also have the cost of living adjustments at $288,000. This recommendation would allow us to increase those contracts from fiscal year 22 that did not receive a cost of living adjustment and meeting the criteria mentioned above.
Yes. Christie, the COLA, that amount is including also the programs that you are going from non-municipal programs.
It does not. On the next, maybe the second to last slide, there is a separate one specifically for those programs to make them 12 months, but they would also get
That's the one.
a part of this 288.
So the 124
It does not include the COLA increase. The 124 is to only make them 12 months, and then they would get additional dollars for the COLA increase. Is that correct? Okay, correct. Thank you. The next slide is sponsorships. Currently, the trust has allocated $25,000 in sponsorships for different events and activities throughout Alachua County. As we have discussed before, this is a great opportunity for us to partner with many of the activities that are taking place in our county. Liz does a fabulous job working with the organizations, helping them apply for the sponsorship dollars. We are represented at all of these events, whether it's on the flyers, whether our banners are at those events, and Liz is at those events and other staff throughout the county, where you see our shirts and our pencils and our shirts and you know. And so we think this, you know, is a great opportunity to increase the budget line for sponsorships because we're running low. And so as the providers learn of the opportunities, we get more requests, and I think she only has a couple of $100 left. And this is March, and so we'd like to increase that opportunity. And then the last slide is funding for the continuation providers. I don't know if you all remember, I feel like it's been about a year and a half now, where the continuation providers were originally funded for 9 months. And then that same service, they were asked to perform it for a 12-month period. And so this will be our opportunity to make those contracts whole as they were asked to do the same amount of work for a long period. And that completes my presentation of the recommendations. Many of the staff helped to determine what the recommendations should be based on the request from the board. And so as you are asking your questions, you may see.
Just to get a dominant staff recommendation.
Got a motion, second? Question by, I'm sorry, second by Dr. Snyder. Yes.
Christie, on the goal, I see on the program impact, you got goal 2, goal 3, and goal 4. Goal 3 were the summer bridge and the social emotional learning. Goal 4, I got was the mentorship. Is everything else goal 2?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
So I want to really support the staff recommendation, but I go back to the discussion we had in the beginning, which is all of our funding, programmatic funding, has been to goal 2. And it's because there's so many great programs being offered for goal 2. I'm going to support the recommendation, but I'm going to tell you loud and clear, if we don't move some of this funding into the things we talked about earlier, I'm not going to support the for today.
Public discussion,
I'm sorry, like this motion simply because I don't know if y'all remember, we actually went into the fund, our fund balance to add money this year. And this is part, and it was about 1 point something million, I don't remember. So we're actually dipping into fund balance to do this. So when we say it's unallocated, well, it's unallocated, but we went into fund balance to do this. And I know that,
We did last year, but not, we did last year, but not this year.
we did it, I think we did it this year. I mean, our budget, we're spending more, we're spending $12 million. And take in 8 million, or 9 million, so we're going to fund balance this year to do stuff. And so, you know, it is, and I think that there's some pretty big considerations that we need to get in place before we spend money. And now there's certain things on here that I'll support, but not just, I think we need to have this blank discussion. I think there needs to be more, and I'm going to be the only one, that's fine. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was gonna say, I have this big confusion, and I think what would be helpful is if we could every month Yeah, like a balance sheet and an operating statement, so those of us who like to see balance sheets and operating statements, because that will help us know how much is fund balance, how much is operating, and what we're using out of reserves. So if we just,
We're spending more than we're taking in.
Well, this is something that was prepared. I don't think that's the one we should look at. I think the page 115, I think is better.
152 or whatever we're starting on, it said the same thing. 152, yeah, right there. I mean, it says $12 million, and our budget is 8 million.
So I think, I think page 115, Diana, where does this come from? Is this system generated report from? Right, and so when we look at that first column there, and it shows the revenue that's coming in. What's the other sources there? Yeah. I don't think we is on. I don't think we is on.
I'm wrong.
But
We're spending more than we're taking in, and, you know, this, you know, it's very good things on here. I mean, we already approved number 1, number 3. I think the summer bridge thing is probably a really good thing. You know, we've heard that sexual emotional from all the listening thing, that's a mental health thing, that's probably good. But some of the other things I think we can wait. I think it should wait. We need to find out, you know, we gotta, sound like a broken record, but we gotta figure out about what we're gonna do for a facility. One time money. And if you spend, if we go into that, the $2 million that's down here, somewhere that the fund balance difference of 2.1 million, and we eat up our, you know, the majority of it, you know, then the facility, and we haven't got anything, I don't think that we have enough, because 5% reserve is not enough. I'm sure the county is more than 5% now.
It's still 5, but we have over 50 from that.
Yeah.
We have reserve and from that, not from out.
So I just think we need probably a greater fund balance to make sure that it looks like there may be something on the horizon. So we want to have some way to continue to pay the program. And I think that's, it should be proving, financially. It's been.
Any citizen input, would like to come forward and please, with your name, after you as people.
My name is Jeff Parker. It's certainly, it's about UB education. I got the back mentoring program was the third one that you were trying to think of. First of all, I want to thank each one of you for doing your job, because I know you have a tough job of trying to decide what you're going to do with the funding to help our youth of Alachua County. Can I ask a question about the presentation you just made? Just a clarification. So the mini grants for the mentoring and stuff like that, would that not be, the RFP would go out in June or July, or would that be funding would be available at that time?
If approved, the funding application would be released in June or July.
Okay, and then there'll be a funding, RFP will be put out for after school care as well, that will be put out in May to fund after school programs for August, correct?
If approved.
Sure, so I guess my question is if they're unallocated money right now, and the new budget year starts in October, and we have programs that are available and ready, all we need is funding, why are we holding up the public money to help the students? Like IGB, we have 3 locations already ready to go for summer programming, and we could help 120 students of Alachua County this summer with $50,000 per center. But yeah, we're holding on to the money, and I'm not gonna point at you, but we're holding on to the money. But essentially, if you release that $50,000, sure, we can help kids in August, but the summertime's already gone. And to Ms. Surge's point, and to Mr. Pinkerson's point, we need occupancy and we need education. We have programs like ours and others in the community that provide occupancy and education. So why are we holding the funds if this argument allocated? I guess that's the question I'm gonna pose to the board. Thank you for your time. And you can look up information on our program, igbfund.com or igbmentoring.com.
Any other?
Good afternoon, Greg Bradley with Miriam's Leadership Academy Board Chair. I want to echo what Jeff said about, first of all, thank the staff for the time that was put in and the analysis put in. Just to remind you, Miriam's Leadership Academy takes 7th, 8th, and 9th graders on a 3-year leadership discovery experience with self-image, purpose-based character, and work ethic. And we amplify that with exposure. So year 1 is local, year 2 is domestic, year 3 is international. So I literally about to fall over from being tired from coming back from Ghana on Saturday, which is we went to do a reconnaissance mission for the kids that we would take there in July. So my comment and my question is, we made a specific ask last month of 234,000 split between a couple of different buckets. And I see the recommendation, but the $50,000 grants that are on mentoring and leadership, assuming that's where we would fall. The only thing I would ask is that there be some flexibility and consideration into not fixing it at 50,000, because if somebody needs 25 and all they need is 25, and somebody else needs 75 or 100, that we're not stuck on a dollar amount. And I don't know how that dollar amount was chosen, but we're not stuck on the dollar amount. We match it to the need that is there, because we thought we would get at least a recommendation back on our specific act. So I do thank you for your time.
Anyone else? Another board comment?
Just a comment, Chair Burton, on the, so what was brought up earlier when we were looking at fund balance and and so forth, do we have a clear number on what was listed as of 2/28/23 versus, and then what's been expended, because it was mentioned that could be, in essence, kind of double counting the expenses, is the way I followed it. Is that something, if we want from October 1st? You know, budget?
Well, the purpose of the exercise was a simplistic view of what we probably have left over in fund balance, and if we use it all, how that's going to affect the next fiscal year. So we did not get into the detail of every expense, what hasn't been expected, basically what was budgeted and what was approved in budgets. And all of that budget money that comes out of the fund balance.
All right.
So there's not 16 million in the banks that we have to spend. We have to be accountable to what we budgeted.
I have a question. Yes. Yes. Here. So my question is if we are starting a new budget process sometime later this year, right? May I have a May, but perfect. Are the people that have we basically every month having to present to us related aging things, are we going to be looking at, are people going to be requesting money and applying for money to be in our budget, or we are just simply looking at things that have already been approved for our budget? But I don't really understand how that works. Anyone explain that to me?
Well,
or you want me to not ask that question?
no, I think it's a good question.
It's been my soapbox, funding what comes we get asked for, as opposed to deciding what we want to fund and going in that direction instead.
I don't know how someone gets into the budget, or have we already used referring funds, or people, we have to, we promised 3 years, but.
All of the above.
All of the above, okay. Right.
Ideally, we do the RFP process, and they decided to do the RFP process, and that would be.
So we're looking at systemic change, and we're looking at all the different things, and let's just use, for example, a couple of the votes we saw today. They might get into our budget versus using unallocated funds. Is that correct?
this would be funds used one time.
They might, I said, they might, any of these, if we're looking at systemic change, we decided these, 10 things work in our flower, you can share the flower, right? I like, the culture. So if those groups are in it, then they go in our budget and they're not gonna be considered the unallocated funds, because they'll be in our budget. All right? In the future budget. So the future budget is for what? Right.
But Judge, the issue is, and you weren't on the board, I don't think I was on the board, I was at the meetings. Create expectation when you want somebody, if they get in this budget cycle, they do more than we're taking.
I hear you.
And so if at some point, unless things keep going with the real estate market like it is, we're getting up, 9-10% increase, so we got another $900,000 to save. But the problem is, if we, and this is what happened initially, is we created expectations that people will be funded. And we think in time, we want to do this more, not a scattershot approach, and get into more specifics. People said, we funded you last year, and it created a crappy environment, and ill will with the community. So, when you use one time money, for anything that's on a continuing basis, it creates expectations. And I don't think that's the situation that you want to get into.
Okay, one comment. So my only comment was, when we approved this budget, I remember where we were sitting in the county commission chambers, and this was a negotiation between you and I, and the negotiation was, let's put some money into unallocated, and I will agree with the rollback. The reason we have less money is because we did the rollback. So for us to now not spend that unallocated money, I think goes back on what we agreed to do as a board that night when we made that grand start. And I hear you, you're right, we are spending more, but that's because we haven't spent more for the last 4 years. Why do we have that? We're not going to spend the capital outlay. We're not going to do that this year. So that's going to go back in, and we'll put it in the budget next year. And we are spending more than we're bringing in. We're spending more than we're bringing in because it's open. That's the reason.
Yeah, but
And we have some major priorities that we have never, ever addressed. We have some entering potential programs that are addressing a goal that essentially has not been addressed. I wish it were more. I made my pitch. I'm making my pitch for next year. I'm not blown away. I would love for it all to be going back to the earlier discussion, but this is what staff's recommended. I'll support it. But I'm hopeful that we can kind of do a big reset going into the 2023-2024 budget. That less, and providers are going to hate to hear this, but less of goal 2 and more of goal 1 and 3 and maybe 4. Systemic change.
And that would be the board priority, determining
Over
what
the next couple of months.
exactly.
Yeah, and building next year's budget, but I want to move forward with that recommendation, allocated, because I feel like we made that commitment when we agreed to do.
So are we saying in zero-based budget for next year?
If that's how you want to think about it, sure. Yeah,
I
that's
think
how,
that's what we, if we make a shift over to priorities in this budget, then I think we're talking zero-based budgeting.
yeah, that's saying that you're funded this year, but you've got to show outcomes that are changing, systemic change outcomes, at least from my perspective, to get into next year. And we can help with that.
And we're saying that's excluding multi-year contracts.
Well, you have to start with 0 and then you go, okay, we've got these multi-years, but you got to identify those layers as we build up from there. Because Leah's right, I'm just doing simple math on the adopted budget. Just even if you take personnel, operating and grant and aid, you're at 10.6 and we're only taking in 8. So we clearly tapped in. So I'm kind of where Ken is.
So I thought we made that agreement.
For the same.
It was a school auditorium.
And I am in support of the motion just for the same reason. that Ken just cited, but I really do, with the caveat, that I really do want us to do some fixed budgets for the next year.
And Marcia, there's nothing in that legislation that's pending in Tallahassee. I know it's about if you want to raise, the amount, you have to get voter approval, right? But that wouldn't apply to.
That is correct.
Because we've already established that was a question.
I was on a call on Friday about, I was on a call on Friday about that. But
Really need,
yeah, there's some, legislation that's moving, but it is about, and yeah, but it wasn't about us, but we're lumped in with everybody else. Where if you wanted to increase your millage rate, you have to take it back to the citizens.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So even if with the, I didn't read it all through, but the ours being capped is actually at $500,000. So even that to increase from where you are, you have to.
That,
So they
that's
went and
what
already went and did-
we're okay.
No, what?
Marcia's
I mean,
saying,
yeah,
is that it was set.
So,
Yes, good. Okay, did you have some first?
yeah, I was.
I always like to,
I just said you have to make some fun.
I just am feeling for staff right now because they're basically putting their head in the lion's mouth. Once the German Shepherd has the bone, don't try taking it away. So if we're going to, and I don't disagree with Commissioner Cornell, I think you're right, and Lee, I think you're absolutely right. Both of you are right.
yeah, absolutely.
But we have to, create a community expectation that these are one-time funds, and that's very hard for somebody running a program to understand. They find a really good employee, they want to assure them they have a job next year, or they want a rental facility, they want to not lose it. I get it, but we have to go back to Cheryl Twombly's work in the strategic planning, and we have to prioritize according to our listening tours and our strategic planning process, even if that means taking away the German Shepherd's bone. We just have to help the staff manage that, because it's not a very nice thing to do.
It's on us.
It's on us to manage a community expectation. We listened, we heard you, we have to change some of our funding priorities, and here they are. And I don't know how to make the twain meet. It's gonna be hard.
I think some of these could be that.
Yes. And these are the ones that would be really nice right now to get started, so that we could say, yes, these are the systemic changes we're looking for. And those of you who received our funding in past, can you modify what you're doing, or can you partner with some of these successful systems changing enterprises? I don't know how else to do it.
Well, I have two things. One is, I appreciate staff's work. I don't want to cause more trouble, but sometimes I do. So I'm gonna turn to you. So is there a way for? Is there a way that we can use the flow chart that Mia gave us and put all the people that we've been working with and all the people that want to work with us and want some funding in that, so we can see where we have overlap and where we have duplication of services? Is it possible we could see something like that? I'm really a visual person, and I don't know how hard that can be. Is it, you're done it?
It's a system map that we're working on.
Okay, you're good. Great. I love when I ask for something. That's not better. And if I said it, it was so easy, but in the corner. So then my second comment was, and Mr. Stroud, and I'm sorry, I agree with him. I was, as soon as I saw the $500,000, I thought, why do we have to be 50,000 for each person, each for 10 people? Could it, someone might only need $10,000. So I'm very supportive of looking at what people need and trying to, not saying, well, you can't apply because you want $60,000, or you can't apply because you only want 10. I think we should let people apply and then,
Why do 10, make the 10 make up the 20?
As long as we find out as we apply, if you don't get the whole amount, what happens? Because
Correct. What happened if you don't hear those?
I like the staff discretion.
Yeah, I was going to, I'm glad about, I mean, I was gonna bring that up, but I was looking in and see.
yeah, I think staff have a credit on that.
Yeah, that happened with, United Way, when we split up the CIC money, they asked if, what could you do? You know, because it was such a limited amount of money,
And that was
What you do when you don't have.
that's why we did it that way.
That way, NIH does that all the time, all the time.
Grants up to.
Sorry, we told you to apply for 500,000, but you're all getting 350, so what are you gonna do? They do that all the time, it's awful.
Yeah, but it may, and as Mr. Bradley said, it may be a situation where somebody applies, they may not need the full allotment of. So I think who made the motion, maybe.
I made it on fire.
With, getting staff, staff description on considering that. Okay. So if there's no other public comment, we will go ahead and vote on favor. Opposed?
No,
Okay, so,
sorry.
that's okay, this is Dr. Hart, who is.
And Lee.
Who else? Lee, and, Reverend Pinkerson and Dr. Hart. Motion carried. Yes, is there any new business?
We got one more item on the agenda. The data system.
That is a new business.
That's what I was getting. I said new business, I was getting there.
Looking at the big header, I was just looking at the item number. My fault.
Okay, so, any discussion? First, I want to congratulate on as much as very
Somebody sent in the slide, but you didn't have a question.
Yeah, and we've already made the motion.
So, did you have a second?
I did, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any phone call? We have to. We're taking phone calls, so I keep asking, I'm sorry, the school board was to take a phone call. Any discussion here in the room? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we had much discussion between our board members today.
And that there's the environmental standards in the back. Anybody want to look at it, to that work out.
Mr. Member Andrews, do you have any comment?
I'd just like to thank the staff, there was a lot of data presented in our backup. It's a lot of work put into it. We'd like to thank everybody. Whether you got to present or not.
Dr. Hart? Dr. Steiner?
There's a lot going on right now. Thank you for the legislative update. I think there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And I'm sure all the things. I can speak for the state.
We're in the morning all together.
I just want to thank staff because they everything is made them. I think this is one of the good robust discussion we've had over the morning. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I especially want to thank organization director for giving notice to listening here, because we talked for about an hour this morning, and she was very nice and understanding, and I feel so much appreciated. And thank you very much for all the information else.
I don't have anything. I got my discussion out in our meeting, and I'm trying to hold on staff for providing information prior to our meeting for us to review. There were the things that were updated and by applicable replacement that not the environment that the policies, the things that are changed, if they be red line or some color, will know it's easily identifiable as what's. when I saw the page in my notebook or the things that were here, I was like, oh, if I even want to get something, I didn't have to do all this corrections. So is there any, if there's nothing else, I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you all.
And then I'll be like, you want your time.